In the beginning of this year, Russia, the biggest country in the world, decided to do something absolutely insane: to invade its neighbor. Putin's army used to be considered the second strongest on Earth, and Russians were, of course, claiming they could capture Ukraine in 2 days.
В горячей войне мы Украину победим за 2 дня.
Один раз и быстро. Может быть, мы до завтра проблему Украины решим.
Western media were also predicting that Ukrainian capital city, Kyiv, is going to fall in a matter of days, if not hours.
And new at noon, Ukraine's capital city of Kyiv could fall to Russian forces, which are quickly advancing.
I am hearing as well that the United States, the White House has been warned that the capital could fall very quickly.
But in reality, Russia just completely failed all of its plans. The country, which was threatening the world,
Берлин, Париж, Лондон, Брюссель готовы гореть?
wasn't able to capture even a strategically important city situated literally 13 miles away from its border. So in this video we will analyze together why did Russia totally fail its attempt to invade Ukraine. Also, you will find out who is this man which accurately predicted a full-scale Russian invasion 8 years ago and even said that it's going to fail.
Но я точно знаю, что с вероятностью 99% россияне войдут на юг и восток своей группировкой, которая сейчас находится вдоль границ Украины, и попытаются взять Киев. Гарантировано Путину военное поражение. Российской группировке здесь гарантировано военное поражение. Они будут выходить отсюда с позором.
What Russian forces did near BRSM gas station, so Ukrainians started to call it BDSM. And also, why does my YouTube channel have a few subscribers? Let me explain everything. So, first of all, let's try to understand when Russia decided to annex Ukraine and for what reason. It is believed that Putin started thinking about invasion back in 2005, after the so-called Orange Revolution in Ukraine. A pro-Russian candidate then, Viktor Yanukovych, rigged the presidential election but was forced to leave. Ukraine started slipping away from the Russian control. Believe it or not, but 5 years later that candidate was backed again by Moscow and somehow became the new president of Ukraine. But for more years later, Ukrainians once again made a revolution and this time kicked him out of the country. Viktor Yanukovych is now living in Russia and sometimes even appears on TV claiming that he's still the only legit president. Yeah, sure.
Остановитесь!
So at that point it became 100% clear for Russia that it will no longer be able to keep Ukraine under control without military power. But there was a problem. Russian army wasn't ready yet for such an ambitious invasion. It needed time to prepare, so Putin decided to start with annexing Crimea only.
Russian troops moving swiftly to take control of military bases in Crimea.
Armored Russian vehicles burst through the wall of Crimea's Baltic base today, firing warning shots and throwing sound grenades.
Ukraine at that time had a deep political crisis caused by revolution and a weak temporary government, which wasn't ready to resist Russia yet. Then Moscow started sending its troops to Donbas region in the east of Ukraine, but they managed to capture only about half of the territory, as Ukrainians finally started to resist fiercely. From that point, the conflict was basically frozen for years, and no one really believed that Russia may attempt to seize all territory of Ukraine. However, one man was actually warning this scenario is inevitable.
Якщо дуже коротко, для того, щоб зрозуміти, як вести далі бесіду, на вашу думку, повномасштабна війна буде?
Война возможна только когда обе стороны желают этого. Если одна сторона хочет воевать, а вторая не воюет, войны не получается, как в Крыму. Будет ли полномасштабная война, я не знаю. Но я точно знаю, что с вероятностью 99% россияне войдут на юг и восток своей группировкой, которая сейчас находится вдоль границ Украины, и попытаются взять Киев.
Back then, these words of Alexei Arestovich, military expert, sounded quite crazy and not many people gave importance to them. But unfortunately, Russia was indeed actively preparing for a full-scale invasion. This is how much Russia spent on the military for the last 10 years, officially and non-officially. Moscow propaganda, on the other hand, started calling Ukrainians Nazis for some reason.
Нацисты из полка Азов.
Безумием нацизм.
Нацистам.
Неонацистам и бендеровцам.
And was convincing audience that their neighbor is becoming a threat to Russia. Unbelievably, but that worked very well, and Russians started hating Ukrainians more than ever and were ready to support Putin's military intervention. At the same time, propaganda was also extremely exaggerating how strong the Russian army is. They went, a little bit too far, claiming they could capture literally any European country.
В Париже не будут рады? Видите, русские войска войдут в Париж.
По собственному захвату Прибалтики.
Чтобы этого государства вообще не было. Западная Польша – это Германия, восточная – это Россия.
About 1 year before the invasion, Putin set an exact date for the offensive. But despite having a lot of time to prepare, the Russian military leadership made a few serious mistakes in the invasion plan. It seems they started to believe their own propaganda machine. Just look at this. In a similar situation, when the USSR needed to restore its political control by using a military power, Soviet army occupied Hungary in 14 days. That's true. Next uprising, they managed to put down even faster. It took just 36 hours to invade Czechoslovakia. So Putin's army decided to do the same with Ukraine, right? But it is a pretty big country. Actually, the second biggest in Europe, after Russia. And for comparison, Soviet Union had to use 2.5 million army to liberate Ukraine from Nazi Germany. Russia, nowadays, decided that for this easy operation, it's enough to use only 200,000 soldiers. Interesting. And keep also in mind that they decided to advance not only from its own territory, but also from Belarus and Crimea. It means Russian army should have carried out the attack on basically 1,000 miles long front line simultaneously. Some military leaders in Russia were trying to warn that everything might go not exactly how it is expected, but they were not able to argue with Putin. So the Russian military machine wanted to sweep away a weak, in their eyes, opponent without plan B. Invasion has begun, and from the first days it became clear how many miscalculations Putin has made. And the most critical ones are: the first one, they extremely overestimated themselves, and the second one, they extremely underestimated Ukrainians. So the Russian army was trying to act exactly like the Soviet, but turned out to be only a poor copy of it. 10 times smaller, many equipment is outdated or in a bad condition. 40% of missiles, for example, never reach targets because they are simply defective. But a strong belief in the same time that their army is unstoppable. They literally were forming 40 miles long columns of military vehicles. There is even a Wikipedia article about that. Imagine how stupid is that nowadays, when militaries have satellites and drones which can detect such targets immediately. Ukrainians could fire at those convoys blindfold and still hitting. And they were hitting, using anti-tank weapon, artillery and military drones. Many of those military convoys were just stuck with all supplies, because there was no more fuel, or the road was blocked, or first vehicles in a column were attacked. Therefore, in many places, these terrifying convoys were just turned into miles-long scrap. Russians, however, were refusing to change the initial tactic, even when it was clear that it's not gonna work. So there is a gas station called BRSM not far away from Kiev. Putin's army wanted to capture one of the main roads to the Ukrainian capital, but one military convoy was destroyed near that gas station. And what would you think? The new portion of vehicles and soldiers came to the same area with the same goal almost immediately. And they were blown up as well. The Russian command was insisting this is still the order and continue sending new forces to this exact spot. Don't get me wrong, this deserves some credit when militaries follow the order, but in this case it was just a pointless self-destruction. So yeah, reportedly they were returning back to that same spot 5 times. And every time Ukrainian militaries were just doing the same and destroyed over 100 units of military equipment there. You probably understand now why that BRSM gas station some people eventually started to call BDSM. And yes, Russians never took control of that road. So Putin's army overestimating itself, using a Soviet approach to fighting, stretching the forces across 1,000 miles front line and creating supply issues, is what Russia did wrong in this invasion attempt. But as I've mentioned before, there is also a second, equally important thing: unbelievably good resistance of Ukraine. Neither Moscow nor the West believed this country could stop Putin's army. Even with all that fails, Russia would still be able to complete the invasion. But what Ukrainians did on a battlefield, fighting in with superior forces, which had 5 times more tanks, 16 times more military helicopters, 22 times more fighter jets, more experience and more people, it's just phenomenal. Ukraine has a will, but Russia has a might. Media were saying, apparently a will can sometimes beat a military power. But the story about success of Ukrainian militaries, its tactic and different approach to fighting, is a topic for a separate video. Would you like to analyze what Ukrainians did from their perspective? And what else helped Ukraine to stop Russia and now even start winning this war? Leave your opinion in the comments to let me know. Guys, there is only one question I didn't answer: why my channel has a few subscribers. You probably understand how difficult it is to stand out on YouTube these days, especially if you try to cover some serious topics instead of making entertaining content. I don't know, maybe it's too ambitious, but can we try to hit 1000 subscribers? Let's find out if it's possible. And of course, every like, every opinion left in the comments is so important and significant. I would be grateful for any kind of your support. Thank you so much for watching this video. See you in the next one. It was Valdemar. Bye bye.